It was late in the evening when I finally decided to head home. The air was damp, and the last traces of daylight had long bled out of the sky. A thin layer of fog was crawling over the ground, coiling around the trees like pale fingers. I had stayed longer than I should have at a friend's house on the other side of town, and now, the only way back was the narrow forest path that cut through the woods, a shortcut I'd taken dozens of times before. Usually, it didn't bother me. I liked the quiet, the way the night air smelled like wet earth and pine. But that night felt different. There was something about the silence that didn't sit right. Normally, I'd hear the distant chirping of crickets or the occasional rustle of leaves. Now, the forest was unnaturally still, as if every living thing was holding its breath. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and kept walking. My footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path. The beam of my phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, but the fog made it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. My battery was low, 8%, so I tried not to keep the screen on longer than necessary. About 10 minutes into the walk, I heard it, a faint snapping sound, like a twig breaking somewhere off the path. I froze. The sound came from the trees to my left. At first, I told myself it was just an animal, a deer, maybe. But then, I noticed something else. There were no follow-up sounds. No rustling. Just one clean snap. And then silence again. I forced a laugh under my breath, trying to shake off the tension, and kept moving. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was being watched. That uneasy, prickling sensation crawled up my neck, making the hairs stand on end. As I rounded a bend in the path, I saw something ahead. A figure. At first, I thought it might just be another person heading home, but the way it was standing wasn't normal. It wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still in the middle of the path, facing me. My flashlight flickered, and the beam briefly illuminated the shape. It was tall. Too tall. Its head seemed to tilt slightly to the side as if studying me. My heart thudded in my chest. I stopped walking. The figure didn't react. We stood there for what felt like a full minute, locked in silent observation. Finally, I took a cautious step backward. The figure suddenly mirrored me. It stepped backward too, with a jerky, unnatural motion, as if it were imitating me but didn't fully understand how. I turned my light off. Instantly, the darkness swallowed everything. My breathing grew louder in my ears. I tried to convince myself it was just some prankster messing with me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I waited, listening. The forest was still dead silent. And then, snap. This time from behind me. I spun around, fumbling with my phone to turn the flashlight back on. The beam cut through the fog, revealing nothing but trees and swirling mist. My pulse was racing now. I didn't want to panic, but every instinct screamed at me to run. I took a deep breath and started walking faster, almost at a jog. The path twisted and turned through the woods, and every time I glanced behind me, the fog seemed thicker, like it was closing in. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Matching my pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again, faster. So did they. I broke into a run. My breath came in sharp bursts. My flashlight beam shook wildly, illuminating only fragments of the path. My phone buzzed in my hand, a low battery warning, 3%. Somewhere behind me, something let out a low, almost guttural sound. Not human. Not animal either. It made my stomach twist in terror. I could see the end of the forest up ahead, a dim orange glow from the distant streetlights. Almost home. I pushed harder, my legs burning. And then, crack. A loud branch snapped directly in front of me. I skidded to a halt. The beam of my flashlight caught something emerging from the fog, right in the middle of the path ahead. It was the figure again. Only this time, it was closer. I froze. My legs refused to move as the figure ahead slowly took shape through the mist. It was standing in the exact center of the path, just a few meters in front of me now. The flashlight's trembling beam revealed details I hadn't noticed before. Its limbs were long and unnaturally thin, as if its bones were stretched. Its head was tilted at the same unnatural angle, like a puppet with a broken neck. I instinctively took a step back, but the figure didn't move. Instead, it emitted a faint sound, a low, wet crackling noise, like someone slowly twisting tree branches. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I turned sharply and ran back the way I came. My lungs burned as the cold air rushed in. Behind me, I heard the same heavy footsteps start up again, this time faster, no longer matching mine but chasing. The forest blurred past me. Fog wrapped around the trees like a living thing, making it hard to tell where the path ended and the woods began. I nearly tripped over a root jutting from the ground. My phone's flashlight flickered, then stabilized, casting shaky light on the twisting path. I could hear it getting closer. A deep, rhythmic thudding that didn't sound like normal footsteps. It was uneven, like something that didn't quite know how to run but was forcing itself to. The guttural sound from before echoed again, louder now, mixed with the crunch of gravel and snapping twigs. Come on, I whispered to myself, desperate to see the warm glow of streetlights ahead again. But when I looked up, I realized something terrifying. I had taken a wrong turn. The path had split somewhere behind me, maybe in the fog, and now I was running down a trail I didn't recognize. The trees here were denser, the fog thicker. The air felt heavier, colder. I slowed down just long enough to catch my breath and listen. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, crunch. A single step. Closer than before. I whipped my flashlight around. The beam sliced through the mist, and caught a glimpse of something slipping behind a tree. A long arm, bending at a strange angle, retreating into the shadows. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but when I unlocked my phone, I saw the battery indicator flashing red. 1%. And no signal. Of course. The forest around me seemed to stretch endlessly. I turned in a slow circle, trying to orient myself, but everything looked the same. Tall, dark trunks. Fog. Empty path. No sounds of cars, no distant houses. Just me and whatever was following. Then, faintly, I heard something new, whispering. It was distant at first, like a breeze through leaves, but then it grew clearer. A chorus of whispers, layered on top of each other, coming from deeper in the woods. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable, beckoning. Calling. I shook my head and started moving again, forcing my legs to go faster. The whispers followed, growing louder. It felt like they were circling me, moving through the trees, ahead and behind at the same time. I glanced over my shoulder, and saw the figure again. Except now there were two of them. Both stood at the edge of the path, perfectly still, their heads tilted in the same eerie way. The fog swirled between their legs, making them look almost like they were floating. No, I whispered. Panic threatened to take over completely. I ran again, blindly, trusting my instincts more than my sense of direction. Branches whipped against my arms, scratching my skin. Somewhere behind me, I heard the whispers twist into something else, a low, rising hum, almost like a chant. It vibrated through the air, making my chest tighten. My flashlight flickered again, then went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I stopped dead in my tracks. Total silence. Total black. I held my breath, straining my ears. That's when I heard it, a single, slow breath. Not mine. Right behind me. I spun around, swinging my dead phone like a weapon, but there was nothing there. Just darkness and fog. The hum started again, louder, surrounding me. My pulse pounded in my ears. I turned and ran into the dark, hands outstretched, crashing through branches, stumbling over rocks. I didn't care where I was going anymore, I just needed to get away. After what felt like forever, I saw it, a faint, distant light through the trees. It wasn't the streetlights. It was small, flickering. Like a lantern? I slowed my pace, squinting through the fog. There was a clearing ahead, and in the center of it stood a wooden shack I had never seen before. The light came from inside. Something about it felt wrong. The structure looked old, like it hadn't been lived in for decades. The wood was rotted, the door hanging slightly ajar. But the light inside was steady. Behind me, the chanting was getting closer. I didn't have time to think. I ran straight toward the shack and shoved the door open. The inside smelled of damp wood and something else, iron, old and metallic. I slammed the door shut behind me and leaned against it, gasping for breath. The chanting stopped. Silence returned. I turned slowly, raising my useless phone for light. My eyes adjusted just enough to see the interior. There were symbols carved into the walls. Dozens of them. Strange, looping shapes I didn't recognize. Some were fresh, others faded. And in the far corner of the room, something moved. I froze, my eyes locked on the far corner of the shack. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The light from the lantern outside was weak, seeping through the cracks in the wooden walls, barely illuminating the interior. But I could swear I saw something shift, something low to the ground, as if it were crouching. My breathing was loud. Too loud. I tried to quiet it, pressing a hand against my mouth. The air inside the shack was cold and damp, smelling of wet wood and something metallic, almost like blood. The movement came again. A scraping sound against the floor, slow and deliberate. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I took one step backward, and the floorboards creaked beneath me like a gunshot in the silence. The scraping stopped. I waited, every muscle in my body tight, my eyes straining against the dimness. Slowly, the shape began to emerge. It wasn't human. At least, not entirely. It was thin, horribly thin, like its skin was stretched too tightly over its bones. Its limbs were twisted at unnatural angles, and its head jerked slightly as if it had trouble holding it upright. The eyes were the worst part, two milky white orbs, staring straight at me, unblinking. I stumbled back against the door, fumbling for the handle. But it wouldn't budge. It was as if the wood had swollen shut or something was holding it closed from the outside. The creature's head tilted, just like the figures on the path. Slowly, it began to rise, unfolding its long limbs like a spider preparing to strike. My phone screen flickered to life one last time, a ghostly, dim light that illuminated the creature fully. Its mouth was impossibly wide, stretching open with a dry, cracking sound. No teeth. Just darkness inside. And then, it moved. Not toward me. It scuttled sideways along the wall, fast, in sharp, unnatural jerks. My instincts screamed at me to get out, but the door still wouldn't move. I slammed my shoulder against it once, twice. On the third try, it finally gave way, and I stumbled backward into the night air. The chanting had started again. It was closer now, surrounding the clearing. Shapes were moving in the fog, tall, thin silhouettes, tilting their heads in unison like marionettes on invisible strings. I sprinted into the trees without looking back. Branches clawed at my clothes. The fog was even thicker now, almost solid, as if the forest itself was trying to keep me inside. The chanting echoed from every direction, rising and falling like a ritual. Somewhere to my left, a lantern light flickered between the trees. Another shack? Another trap? I ignored it and kept running, focusing on what little I could see of the faint trail ahead. Then, the whispers started again. Not distant this time. Right next to my ear. Don't run. I spun around. Nothing. But the voice was clear, almost gentle, like someone standing inches away. I turned back toward the path, and froze. Something was standing directly in front of me. Not one of the figures this time. A person. At least, I thought it was. It was an old man, wearing tattered clothes, his face hidden under the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He held a lantern in one hand, its weak orange light flickering against his sunken cheeks. His eyes were strange, pale, unfocused, like he was looking through me rather than at me. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice hoarse and shaky. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. "They follow the light," he continued, raising his lantern slightly. "They've been here longer than any of us. You run, they follow. You hide, they wait. You see them," he paused, tilting his head. "Then it's already too late." Behind him, in the fog, the tall figures were gathering again. "Come," the old man said, turning abruptly. "If you want to live." I hesitated for only a second before following. We moved through the trees, his lantern barely piercing the fog. The chanting grew fainter behind us, but the whispers persisted, weaving through the air like invisible threads. "Who are they?" I finally managed to ask between breaths. "They don't have a name," he replied without turning. "They were here before the forest. Before the town. Some say they're the shadows of those who got lost and never found their way out. Some say they're older than time itself. Doesn't matter. You saw them. Now you're marked." His words sent a cold shiver through me. We reached a small dip in the ground, a kind of natural hollow surrounded by old stones. In the center stood an ancient-looking well, covered by a crooked wooden lid. "Down," the old man said. "What? Down? It's the only place they can't reach." I stared at the well, hesitation clawing at me. It looked unstable, dangerous. But the whispers around us were growing louder again, circling closer. The old man lifted the lid and revealed a narrow ladder disappearing into darkness. Without another word, he climbed down. I took a deep breath, glanced over my shoulder at the shifting fog, and followed him. The air inside the well was damp and cold. The ladder creaked with every step. As I descended, the chanting stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse. Then, from above, I heard the sound of the lid closing. And something breathing. Not the old man. Something else. The ladder groaned as I descended into the darkness, each rung colder than the last. The air grew damp and heavy, and the faint light from the lantern above faded until there was nothing but black. I counted the rungs under my breath to keep calm. 10, 20, 30. It felt endless. Finally, my feet touched solid ground. The old man was standing a few steps away, holding his lantern. The weak orange light flickered over ancient stone walls, rough, uneven, and wet with condensation. The air down here smelled of earth, mildew, and something else, something metallic, like dried blood. "This way," he whispered. We moved through a narrow tunnel that sloped gently downward. The ceiling was low enough that I had to hunch my shoulders, and the walls were close on either side, forcing me to brush against the cold stone as we walked. The sound of dripping water echoed through the tunnels, but there were no other noises. For the first time since I entered the forest, the chanting and whispers were gone. "How far does this go?" I asked. The old man didn't answer. He walked slowly but steadily, like someone who had made this journey many times. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. The ceiling arched high above, supported by thick wooden beams that looked ancient and half-rotted. In the center of the room stood a massive stone slab, carved with strange symbols, the same looping shapes I had seen on the shack walls. The old man stopped in front of it. "This is where it started," he said quietly. I stepped closer, tracing the carvings with my eyes. They were deep, precise, not like something made with ordinary tools. They almost looked grown, as if the stone itself had formed them. "Long before the town was built," the old man continued, "there were others here. People who worshipped what lives in the fog. They believed the forest was alive, not just trees and animals, but something older. Something that could watch. Listen. Take." He turned to me, his pale eyes catching the lantern light. "They made a pact. Offerings in exchange for safety. For centuries, the town grew around the forest. But eventually, people forgot. They stopped listening. Stopped giving." I swallowed hard. "And what happens when they stop?" He looked back at the slab. "The forest remembers." A low rumble echoed through the chamber. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But the sound grew louder, vibrating through the walls and floor. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere behind us, a distant, hollow thud echoed down the tunnel. "They found the well," the old man hissed. "They know you're down here." We hurried deeper into the underground maze. The tunnels twisted like the roots of an ancient tree. Some were so narrow we had to squeeze through sideways. Others opened briefly into small caverns filled with stagnant pools of water that reflected the lantern light in eerie patterns. At one point, we passed a wall covered entirely in scratch marks, dozens, maybe hundreds of overlapping gouges carved into the stone by fingernails or something sharp. Some were fresh. "Others have come down here before," the old man said without looking. "They don't usually make it out." We reached another chamber. This one was smaller, with a single stone pillar in the center. On top of it rested an old wooden box, bound with rusted iron bands. The old man approached it carefully, almost reverently. "What is that?" I asked. He placed his lantern beside the pillar and ran his hands over the box. "Something they left behind. Something that keeps them away, for a while." He unlatched the box, and the hinges creaked. Inside was a bundle of yellowed cloth. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing an object I didn't recognize, an irregular piece of black stone, smooth and cold, shaped almost like a heart but wrong, too angular, too sharp. "They fear this," he whispered. "I don't know why. I just know it works." The rumbling sound came again, louder now. The tunnel behind us groaned as if something massive was moving through it. "They're coming," I said. He nodded grimly. "Hold the stone. Whatever you do, don't drop it." I took it from him reluctantly. The moment it touched my skin, a shiver ran through my entire body. It was ice cold, but more than that, I felt a pulse. A faint, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The old man grabbed his lantern and led me toward a narrow side passage. The walls here were closer, the ceiling lower. We had to crouch as we moved. The sound behind us shifted, it wasn't chanting anymore. It was whispering. Fast. Overlapping. Coming from every direction. "Keep moving," he muttered. The tunnel bent sharply and opened into another space, but this one wasn't like the others. It was circular, with walls covered in carvings that spiraled inward toward a hole in the center of the floor. From that hole rose a faint mist, colder than the surrounding air. The old man raised his lantern. "This is where they come through," he said. Before I could ask what he meant, a sound echoed through the tunnels, an inhuman scream, high-pitched and echoing, like metal being torn apart. The lantern flickered. "They're here." Shapes began to appear in the tunnel behind us. Tall. Twisted. Their heads tilted in perfect unison. The old man turned to me, his face pale and desperate. "If they take you, you don't come back. Do you understand? You don't come back." The whispering grew deafening, swirling through the room like a storm. The fog from the hole thickened, creeping toward us like living smoke. And then, the lantern went out. For a second, I thought I'd gone blind. My breath caught in my throat as I clutched the cold black stone against my chest, feeling its unnatural pulse beneath my fingers. The tunnel walls vanished. There was no sense of space, only the sound. The whispering. It was everywhere now. 1,000 voices overlapping, weaving together in a chorus that made my head spin. Some were high and childlike. Others were low and guttural, like they came from deep inside the earth. They weren't speaking any language I recognized, but the intent was clear. They were calling. Then came the footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Multiplying. "Stay close," the old man's voice hissed in the dark. "Don't let go of the stone." I couldn't see him, but I felt his hand brush mine briefly before pulling away. The sound of scraping echoed behind us, followed by a long, wet inhalation. Whatever was in the tunnel was close. The old man struck something, flint against steel, and the lantern flared weakly back to life. Its glow was dimmer now, trembling as if the darkness itself was fighting to swallow it. And then I saw them. Dozens of figures filled the tunnel behind us. Tall, emaciated silhouettes, their heads tilted at the same unnatural angle. Their limbs were too long, bending in ways bones shouldn't. They moved in jerky motions, like puppets on tangled strings, but their faces were wrong. Blank. Smooth. Like clay that had never been shaped. The whispering rose to a fever pitch. The old man grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the spiraling chamber. The mist pouring from the hole in the floor had thickened into a swirling column, as if something beneath was stirring. "This is it," he muttered, his voice trembling. "We make our stand here." Before I could respond, one of the figures lunged forward. It didn't run, it seemed to glide across the floor, covering the distance between us in seconds. The old man swung the lantern at it, and the creature recoiled, shrieking like metal scraping on stone. "They fear the light," he shouted. "And the stone. Hold it high." I raised the black stone above my head. Instantly, the whispering faltered, like a choir losing its rhythm. The fog pulled back slightly, and the frontmost figures hesitated. For the first time, they didn't advance. But then the ground began to shake. A low rumble built beneath our feet, growing into a deep, thunderous vibration. Cracks split through the floor around the hole. The mist burst upward in a sudden surge, filling the chamber with freezing air. Something was coming. The old man turned to me, his pale eyes wide with terror. "They're not the worst thing here," he whispered. "They're just the messengers." The lantern light flickered violently. The figures pressed closer again, emboldened by the darkness. One reached out toward me, its hand long and skeletal, fingers bending backward like broken twigs. I backed away, clutching the stone tighter. "What do we do?" I shouted. He didn't answer. He was staring at the hole, his face frozen in horror. A sound rose from the depths. Not a voice. Not footsteps. Something else. A low, resonant tone that vibrated through the air and into my bones, like the forest itself was exhaling. The figures dropped to their knees, tilting their heads back in unison. Their whispering transformed into a rhythmic chant, echoing off the stone walls. The old man grabbed my shoulder. "Run. But, run." He shoved me toward one of the side tunnels. I stumbled into the darkness, the lantern's light fading behind me. I didn't look back. The chanting grew louder as I ran, like a tide chasing me through the narrow passages. The tunnel twisted and forked in endless directions. I had no idea which way led to the surface. All I had was the black stone pulsing in my hand, guiding me somehow. Every time I reached a fork, it seemed to grow colder in one direction and warmer in another. I followed the warmth. Behind me, the rumbling intensified. The air grew thick and hot, like the forest was breathing down my neck. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw it, a faint sliver of light ahead. I sprinted toward it, lungs burning, legs trembling. The tunnel widened, the ceiling rose, and then I was climbing. A narrow shaft, rough stone walls. I clawed my way upward, fingers bleeding, breath ragged. I burst out into the night air with a gasp. I was in the forest. The fog was still there, but thinner now. The trees loomed overhead like silent sentinels. Somewhere in the distance, I saw the warm glow of streetlights. Home. Civilization. I didn't wait. I ran. Branches whipped against my face, the forest floor crunching beneath my feet. Every step felt like it might be my last. Behind me, the forest groaned, and the whispering echoed faintly through the trees, chasing me all the way to the edge. When I finally broke out of the woods and onto the empty road, I collapsed. My chest heaved. My hands were trembling. The black stone was still in my grip. Its pulse was slower now. Almost calm. For a long time, I just lay there, staring up at the night sky, trying to convince myself it was over. Then, in the distance, I heard it. A snap. Like a twig breaking somewhere in the trees. I sat up slowly, staring into the darkness. The fog was rolling toward the road again, creeping along the ground like fingers searching for something. And then I saw it. A single figure. Tall. Motionless. Head tilted. Watching me.